I was writing this book with my colleague Helle Jensen, who is coming to Ljubljana in November, for a few reasons. Both of us had been working with schools and kindergartens for 20-25 years as trainers, consultants, supervisors, and so on. We were also heavily involved in schools, especially in the late part of the 80s and in the 90s when the trouble started, so to speak. We got our experience from many different levels, giving lectures to a lot of teachers, a lot of parents, working individually with teachers. We had, and we still have, a contract with the Teachers Association in Denmark to try to help and take care of those teachers who are experiencing big difficulties, who are burning out, or even the young teachers over the last 7-8 years who come from their education full of energy and enthusiasm and then find themselves disappointed after a year or two in the school. So we had a chance to follow very closely what is working and what is not working. We don't know anything about teaching, Slovenian or geography or history or anything else. I am a teacher originally, but I have forgotten everything about that in the meantime. So our interest is what is happening between the adults in the school and what is happening between teachers and children, and what is happening between teachers and parents. The book is structured in a way that we are trying to mix theory and concrete examples on the main theme, which is pedagogical or relational competence for teachers and pedagogues. There's a big, long chapter about a new or reinvented way of cooperating and collaborating with parents. There's also a chapter on leadership, not only for school directors, but since every teacher, every pedagogue is also a leader of a group or of a conversation or an activity, leadership is the first and foremost interest in this field. You will hear me say, probably, a lot of critical things, especially about school. It's very important for me to say that I don't know any Slovenian schools. I have not been inside. And in my experience, there's a big difference between schools and teachers. There are very, very many terrible schools, and most of them have wonderful teachers also. So please remember that and don't take what I say personally unless it fits. Our background or our motivation was that in the mid-90s, teachers all over Europe actually started complaining. They started complaining about children that would not sit still, that were not able to concentrate, that were sabotaging lessons and so on and so forth. They were also asking the good old question, is it really so that we in the school also have to assist parents in raising their children, meaning trying to implement moral, social norms and patterns of behavior. And this, for me, this question was asked the first time when I started my teacher's education in 1965. And it was a funny question to philosophize about. It is also the wrong question to ask, because you cannot be with children without also influencing the way they behave, not only today but also tomorrow. So what happened was that the teachers were not satisfied. They felt unable to do their job as well as they would like to. And that, of course, is a very terrible situation to be in. They tried, as we have seen all over Europe now, they tried to find out who was guilty first. And the first scapegoat they found were parents. Like, parents were too busy and they didn't want to get involved with their children and so on and so forth. Then parents fought back, and a lot of research showed that this was simply wrong. There has just been research published yesterday in Denmark showing that compared to 20 years ago, Danish parents, fathers and mothers, or mothers and fathers, I should say, are spending 1.5 to 2 hours more per day with their children than they did 20 years ago. So, who is next to blame? The children, of course. So now the children are being blamed. And they're not only being blamed, they're also being diagnosed. We know, of course, that teachers and pedagogues are just like normal people. So when they get frustrated, they start talking crazy. And blaming the children for this lack of success in teaching is crazy. It's not only crazy, it's also unethical, and it's immoral, as I will show as we go along. We had a lot of experience on what can adults do when they are not satisfied, when they're frustrated about their relationship to children. And I keep saying children, because I would like to make it clear that the good old days will never come back. Those were the days when children did not go to school, only pupils went to school. And this is over. Very soon we will also experience great numbers of parents who are no longer afraid of school and teachers. This has already started in the Scandinavian countries, so now teachers are complaining that parents are critical. 10 years ago they complained that they were not interested. So there are lots of things going on, and I think everybody is beginning to realize that in school, kindergarten is just like in a family. When the adults don't feel well, then the children do not thrive, they do not function. And it is interesting to see the confusion, the helplessness in a way of adults. One way of trying to escape is to implement different methods. At the moment there are like 6 or 7 on the market, and the most recent one is a system where the teachers every morning they get like 2 handfuls of little, it's like little tokens. So every time they see a child that is doing something good or nice, they give this token to the child. And when the child has collected 10 of these tokens, he can get a bigger token. And when it has 10 bigger tokens, it can get a certificate. And this is a well-known method. Paulo invented that. It's like it's the same way you train dogs. You know, you just reward them when they do what you want, and punish them when they don't do what you want. And you could think, or at least I can understand. I can even sympathize with parents who are so desperate that they try also things like that. But I get shocked when I hear it from professional pedagogues. And I did that. I was giving a seminar in Berlin 2 weeks ago, and one leader of a kindergarten came up to me afterwards and said, "You made me feel so bad with what you said, because we do that in our kindergarten." And I said, "What are you doing?" "Well, we are giving these tokens." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because for the last 2 years we have had big difficulty making our children," and we're talking about children between 3 and 5, 5.5, making our children clean up their toys and their collars and things at the end of the day. And I think this is the closest you can get to pedagogical bankruptcy. That if 10 well-educated adults cannot get 24-year-olds to clean up their mess, then they should go back to school. But there is a serious side of this. And the serious side is that since we lost power, since we lost physical power, and now this is becoming a reality also in Slovenia, that it is not anymore allowed to beat or threaten children with physical violence, it has been extremely difficult for adults to find out how do we provide leadership for children and youth that is both effective, meaning that it serves the purpose of learning, for instance, and also not violating the personal integrity, the personal boundaries of each child. This is the basic question that professionals are asking themselves, parents are asking themselves. It's even the question that leadership within industry and other places are asking themselves if they are a little awake at least. Part of the answer to that question is what this book is about. I will say something also about what is, in my opinion, needs to be done with this institution. And let me say that kindergarten and school are very, very, very different. School was invented to serve the needs of the industrialized society, and it is still functioning as if we had an industrialized society. It is still functioning as if quiet, obedient children and adults are what our society needs. And I think most of you are aware that this is absolutely not what society needs. So there are like three questions we need to look at. One is which kind of school, that means which kind of citizens, does our government want? And at the moment, in the European community, this is decided by a bunch of old guys over 65, and they want what men have always wanted. They want peace. They want, it has to be quiet and peaceful. That's what they want. And they're coming up with all kinds of ideas of how to get it, and they're not successful. We also have to look at what kind of children do parents want. And last but not least, we have to get some idea about what kind of children do children want. What is serving their basic needs. Because we have this mystery, paradox, that all over Europe, if you open television around the 1st of September, you will see thousands and thousands and thousands of children who are starting school. And I mean, 99.9% of them are happy, they're enthusiastic, they're interested, they're looking forward, they cannot wait to learn. And 2 years later, they're dead. And don't tell me that this is because of their parents. It's not. It's because our schools are not functioning to their purpose. And we try to repair them. But the problem is that we're trying to repair them with the same philosophy, the same idea with which we created them. And this doesn't work anymore. It is very, very far from working. So somehow we need to make schools a much, much, much better place for the adults who work there and for the teachers. And please don't make any mistakes about that. I'm not a romantic. I'm not somebody who just walks around the world and says you have to love children and therefore you have to behave. I know that reality is different. And I know that if you want children to feel good, if you want them to behave, as we say, if you want them to thrive, if you want them to develop in a healthy way, you have to take very, very good care of the adults that have to be with them. And this is also the case for teachers. I wrote a book, I don't know, 82 or something, called An Apple for the Teacher. Now I'm not so sure that apples can do it. I think we need something more. A few things about the title. Obedience has been the objective of pedagogics and child rearing within the family for about 250 years. We know what that has done to people. We know that in terms of mental health, in terms of life quality, it has been a disaster. But this was what industry needed, so this was what they got. We know that obedient children and youngsters and even adults are very pleasant to be around. The last group of citizens that were nice and obedient and pleasant were the women. But now they have stopped. So they also don't obey anymore. And this of course makes life for the rest of us difficult. but that's another story. Um, to put it simply, to be the kind of child that most schools in Europe have as the ideal pupil, you have to be a middle class girl. These are the ones who fit into this picture. The other 80% doesn't fit in to this. And making boys behave like girls is very difficult. You can learn them to sit down and you can teach them how to sit down and pee, but that's about it. So when we think about obedience, we say, okay, we know that this is not good. Most of us immediately start thinking of the opposite, which is disobedience. So the question to me could be, but is that what we want? Do we want disobedient children? And the answer is no. We do not want disobedient children. It doesn't serve any purpose for the children, it doesn't serve any purpose for the teachers, for the parents, or anything. What we want is an alternative to obedience. What is the healthy alternative to being obedient? And we know the answer. We know the answer from working with adults, with youth, with children over the last 50 years. The answer is responsibility. To enable and allow each adult, each child, each young person to be responsible for him or herself. This, by the way, is also the quickest way to developing a healthy self-esteem. So it's very important for me to make it clear at the beginning that we are not talking about the old opposition, so to speak, between the authoritarian way on the one hand and the free or democratic way on the other hand. This is what we are seeing in Germany at the moment. The German school system is 100 times worse than the Slovenian. The German school system is completely bankrupt in any sense, also financially, by the way. But now parents are beginning to build private schools. They always did that. We always had the Montessori schools and the Steiner schools and so on. Now there's a new movement, and now they want to make democratic schools. And let me warn you, if I can, that to go for democracy as the supporting values of a school is a detour. It doesn't work. We tried that in Denmark. Teachers in schools were working till they started bleeding in the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. And we have schools that have a very, very, very high standard in terms of democracy. But that does not help the things that I'm going to talk about today. Not in institutions and not within families. Democratic values are beautiful, they're wonderful. We try to establish a democratic society, and therefore it should also reflect on schools and families. But it is not enough to make a working relationship function for 10 or more years, just as it is not enough to make a family function. So, what we talk about is what is needed The Norwegian government, they're planning to change the education of teachers. So they asked their colleagues at the Pedagogical University in Copenhagen to do what is called a meta-research, meaning that the scientists went through, I think, 86 scientific reports on learning. How is learning taking place, and what are the best conditions for learning? And they came up with a result saying that in order to be a good teacher, in order to make it possible for children to have a good learning process, you need 4 competencies. You need, of course, the academic competence, and at the moment, this is what is going on in Scandinavia, that politicians and school people are trying to change the education of teachers to make it more academic. This is, I think it's, in a way, it's a good idea. You can understand their idea, because this is being promoted by the teachers' unions, and they, of course, want to get the highest possible salaries for their members. It does not, however, give the teachers any tools, any know-how, any training in handling what they experience on a daily basis as their biggest difficulties. You need to master rule-based leadership. Every family needs about a handful of rules in order to function. Pedagogical institutions need like 2 handfuls. So you have to know how to do that. Then didactic competence, which everybody knows what is, planning, structuring, and so on. And then for the first time, interpersonal or relational competence. I have, of course, marked that with red, as if that was the most important. And this is simply because, in my experience, it is the most important. But this is not what the scientists are saying. They are not making a priority of these 4 competencies. They are simply stating the fact that these are the 4 that you need. I have met hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teachers and pedagogues who had excellent academic competence, who were excellent leaders in the sense of explaining, following up on rules and stuff like that, who were very keen, engaged, clever planners of education, and still they failed in the classroom because they did not have the interpersonal competence. And no wonder, because there is no teacher's education in the world that prepares, educates, or trains teachers in one-to-one relationship with children or one-to-one relationship with parents. So what has now become the 2 most important activities, not that they should overrule teaching, but in order to support the teaching process, the collaboration, the dialogue with parents, and the dialogue with children is what is completely absent in the teacher's education. So don't blame your son's teachers for not knowing how to do it. If they don't blame yourselves, because there's nothing in the education that prepares you for that. So in a way, when we put even newly educated teachers in a classroom directly from university, it is like taking a cook out of school and asking him to become a baker. And of course, if he is talented, if he is a multitasker, he will become a pretty good baker after 4, 5, 6 years. But it will of course be frustrating for him that he took the wrong education. So this is like the basis of what we know so far. Then we can ask, what is this? Why did this relational competence surface? Why did it come up? Why suddenly should we do that? And there are many, many reasons. One is that children have changed, which is really not true. Children are exactly the same as they were 100 years ago. But they have become less and less and less afraid of adults. Most children now are not broken spiritually when they are about 3 years old. My whole generation was that. When we were 3 years old, we were nice, except the 2-3% who did not or never become nice. They are also not anymore the children of our country. They are not anymore the children of our village. They are the children of the world. They get access to knowledge, to information that was unthinkable 25 years ago. Not only good. Then we have had to revise our understanding of developmental psychology. The textbooks for developmental psychology that I had when I became a teacher, I read one of them when we were writing this book, and 99% of what is in there has since been proven wrong. So, what has come instead? What has come instead is relational psychology, a whole different way of studying the development of children and thus also picking up on the supreme importance that for children, of course, is the relationship with mother and father, but with everybody. You could say that that should not surprise us, because we all know that our well-being, our motivation, our energy, and so on differs depending on who we are with and what kind of relationships we're in. But nobody thought that that was true also for children. Or maybe they thought it was true, but why should we take that seriously? Because nobody took that seriously in the industrialized society. The idea was not health, the idea was production. Then came neuroscience. Neuroscience, neurobiology, neuropsychology, and so on, has only been massively interested in the development of the healthy child within the last 15 years. Before they were mostly studying problematic kinds of behavior. Now they are slowly mapping the development of the brain in a normal, regular, healthy, average child. If you listen to neuroscience and their findings about learning, they have found two things. It has even gotten a name. It is now called brain-based learning. And it says two things that every child knows. But sometimes science has to confirm what children know before it becomes true. First one is, you cannot learn if you are bored. Second, you cannot learn if you feel stupid. Third, that the best learning takes place when the teachers are enthusiastic about what they're teaching. So these are the three basic elements. And there are very, very few schools in this world, there are very few classrooms where these conditions are okay. Democracy plays a role. Children naturally assume nowadays that they have a say, that they should at least be able to express their opinion and be taken seriously. In this respect, they have developed in the same unfortunate way as women. But we also have an additional goal or several goals in our legislation about schools, which is that we have to also in schools, especially, not especially, but it's obvious for kindergarten, but for schools also have to be part of the individual, personal development of children in their social development, which is now called social competence or personal social competence. This is also a new thing that we have to do. I remember when this was entered in the Danish school law about 15, 20 years ago. And one of the paragraphs in this law says that every class teacher has to have one individual dialogue with each child per year. After that, the headmaster started calling us and saying, how much does it cost? We said, what? And they said, we need a communication course. And it all boiled down to the fact that the teachers were stressed, they were insecure, they were panicking, because they realized that they have never learned how to sit face to face with a child and have a conversation. They were teaching children, they were talking to children, they were instructing children, they were doing all kinds of things, but they were never having conversations, they were never having dialogues. So suddenly all schools require training in that, which was a good thing. So there's no reason to assume anymore that the adults that work in school, it doesn't really matter if they're 65 years old or they're 26 years old. There's no reason to expect that they come with the competence that they will need in order not only to survive, but also to enjoy being teachers. This competence is contrary to the way most people are brought up. Let me start with the older teachers, teachers my age, over 60. We were all brought up in families and schools where we learned that you as an individual is not important. It is not about you. Now we come and say, if you want to develop a personal authority in relation to children, you have to discover who you are. You have to take yourself serious. You have to, and so on and so forth. So after having lived with a philosophy of life for 40, 50, 60 years, and believed that this was the way I could be of value to children, to my society, and so on, the premises are suddenly completely new. That is not easy. It has nothing to do with whether I like children or not, or whether I like teaching or not. It has to do with the fundamental change of values that I will normally not be willing to do unless I find myself in trouble or in crisis. We have been teaching and doing training in this for 15, 20 years now, as I said, and now we begin to meet young teachers for whom this is natural. Of course, they say. There's nothing difficult about that. This is the way I was raised in my family, so what? Are we going to learn something interesting also? Apart from this. But it's not easy. If you are brought up and if you have been making your money for many years with a reality that says that because I am a teacher, because of my role, I also have authority. Now suddenly, not only teachers, same goes for mothers, fathers, pedagogues, policemen and women, politicians, so on. They no longer have authority just because they have the job they have. They have to earn not only our trust and respect, but they also have to develop a very different kind of authority than the one that comes from power. So it is, in many ways, it is a change of paradigm which goes far beyond teaching. Within a school, there are many crucial relationships. Headmaster, teachers, they're very different traditions in different countries. How do we select headmasters of schools? If we have, like the Austrians, for instance, the Austrian school has not changed basically since Maria Theresia. And so what are the basic values of school? They are bureaucratic. So, of course, headmasters have to be bureaucrats, and they have to be obedient bureaucrats, and therefore they are selected politically. That means from their political standpoint, not because of their professional competence. And it changes from country to country. In Denmark now, politicians are trying to save money, so they are saying, well, every school doesn't really need a headmaster. Let's have one for every city. and I think everybody who ever worked within a school knows that this is crazy. This is completely crazy. So, leadership is important. It is important simply because teachers should feel good at their place of work, and they should be treated not only okay, but they should be treated very well by their leadership, and not only the political leadership. Then there is the teacher-teacher relationship that becomes more and more important. For more than a century, teachers have been having their own little kiosk within the school, and they have been doing like individual teaching in their job, and they have not really been collaborating. Now, they will have to work in teams. They would have to work in groups. They would have to do all the things that they're trying to teach the children. And we're discovering that teachers lack social competence to a very, very scary degree. Then there's, of course, the teacher-child and the teacher group of children relationship, and then there is the teacher-parent or teacher-parent relationship. So everything is about relations. Everything is about relationships, and in every one of these, except the first one, the teacher, the pedagogue, is leader, is the boss, is the one who decides, not in his brain or her brain, but the one whose behavior is creating the quality of the contact or the lack of quality of the contact. So this is an amazingly big responsibility. Let me say a little about what is relationships. What do we mean when we talk about relation? It has two levels. One is the content level, and the other is the process level. The content level is the one that school was born with. Content has always been in the focus of school. Of course it has, because this is the idea. The idea is that children within 10 years must learn this and this and this and this and this and this and this. That is wonderful. And as long as we had an authoritarian society around us, as long as we had authoritarian fathers and mothers, it was almost working. Now we don't have that anymore. We don't even have a moral consensus anymore. So now suddenly the process, not only what we are doing, but how we are doing it, is extremely important. Let me give you one little example. Imagine that I'm a teacher. I started third grade at the end of August, and in third grade there's a new child. And this new child is a boy, and I have now been trying for 1.5 months to find a way to collaborate with this boy. I have been trying to find a way to be with him, to talk to him, to teach him, and so on, that works for both of us. And I have not been successful. He's disturbing, he's not learning, he's talking back to me in a way that I dislike, and you can use your own imagination to go further. So what do I do? Well, tradition in school is that you take the child aside, or you do it in front of everybody, if you're a little sadistic. But you take the child aside and you say, what is wrong with you? You're not functioning, you're disturbing, you're doing this, you're doing this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And why have teachers been able to get away with that? Because it is a very primitive kind of communication. Simply because this was also the way parents communicated. I cannot remember once that my parents and my teachers disagreed about me. I was a nuisance to my teachers. Sometimes I was saved by the fact that it was easy for me to learn. But they didn't like my behavior. And the part of my behavior that they did not like was exactly the part that my parents also disliked. Now you will find it very different or difficult to find two parents and one teacher that agrees on a child and say, what is this? So This is the old way. I am now giving the child a lesson. I'm telling him what he's doing wrong, how he should do it right, and what the consequences are if he doesn't change. This never worked. Never, ever worked. There has never been one student in any school in the world who has come up to his or her teacher 2 days later and said, "Thank you. I'm very, very grateful. For 20 minutes you made me feel like a terrible human being, stupid, ignorant, and impossible. And I love you for it." It never happened. But it made the teachers feel good because they had like, now I have played teacher. I've said all the right things, and I've done my job, and I can get paid with a good conscience. So what can you do? Well, the dialogue is different. The dialogue sounds something like this. "Hello, Peter, sit down. Let me tell you that we have known each other now for 6 weeks, and I have tried anything I know, everything I know, to find a way to cooperate with you. And now comes the difficult sentence. And I have not succeeded. I have not succeeded." And it's interesting how difficult teachers find it to say that to a child. Because when they talk to a psychologist or a supervisor, they say it without any problem. "I've tried everything I know with this child and I'm not succeeding." But saying it to the child is like, no. So, I have not succeeded. I know that this means that I am doing something wrong. And I don't know what that is. So I need your help. I need you, Peter, to tell me what am I doing wrong in relation to you. Most Peters, so around 9 years old, will react like this. They will lower their head and they will say, "I don't know." The response to that is, "Of course you don't know now, but I'm sure you do know. So please think about it and we'll talk again in 2 days." That takes how long? 2.5 minutes. So time is not a reason not to do it. It takes 2.5 minutes. And what it does is that it changes Peter's attitude from being opposed to his teacher to become the chairman of her fan club. Because he is experiencing that here is an adult that is responsible. I never met one like that before. For 250 years, Peter doesn't know that, but I know. For 250 years, adults have been irresponsible. They have been saying, parents, teachers, everybody, when my relationship to my children is a success, it is my success. When it is a failure, it is the fault of the children. They are guilty. This is an amazing double play that adults have been able to get away with because they had violence or social consequences as their weapon. Now children are seeing right through that, and their reaction is, of course, "Fuck you. You are asking me to be responsible? You're asking me? Where's your responsibility?" So then you take him, and then now I will shift from school to family, because I had a wonderful example on my plate 2 months ago. I was in Istria, and a colleague of mine, or former student, young psychologist, called me. And she said, I need help. That's not true. My sister needs help. I said, what happened? Well, neighbors found her 5-year-old boy going along the road with a stone in his hand, and he was making dents in all the cars. And I said, did your sister say anything to him yet? She says, no, she's in shock. She doesn't know what to say. I said, okay, tell her to say the following. First she says, I have never ever in my life been so close to beating you to pieces. But I'm not going to do it, if I can help it. But what I do want, I want to know what you're so angry about. And this 5-year-old said, of course, don't beat me. and he's never been beaten, so it was not. And then he said, I don't know. And mother said, okay, tell me when you find out. He woke his mother up 5 o'clock in the morning the next day and said, now I know. She said, what do you know? Why I'm so angry? The thing is that 6 months earlier he had a little sister. Belongs to the story. So he said, because you're always screaming at me. And like any adult, parent or teacher, the automatic reflex is to say, that's not true. Of course I'm not screaming at you. Or only if you deserve it. So, and she said that, of course. She said, that's not true. But this is a strong boy. So he said, Mama, listen to me. It is true. But when, she said, when was I screaming at you? Every time you sit with the little one, you scream at me. And then she realized that what he said was true, which is it was not true, because he was not screaming. But she got this little edge in her voice, saying, you know, can't you see that I'm with your little sister and you're not really important, and go talk to your father. That is screaming when it comes into the ears of a child. And she said, okay, I see what you mean, sorry, I'll try to stop it. And I always advise people to say, I will try to stop it, never promise. Because when we try to change our behavior, we are not successful every time. And it's wonderful for children to know that changing behavior is difficult, also for adults. It's not something that you just do. I met this family 2 days later. Boy was there, and mother said, I feel I'm not doing my job. And I said, why? Because I feel I should tell him that it's terrible what he's been doing, it costs a lot of money, you should not destroy other people's property, this whole list of things. I said, when he feels stupid, he cannot learn. He knows that the 5-year-old that walks around the street in a culture where big fancy cars is the only thing that counts almost, he knows that this is bad, bad, bad. You don't need to tell him. I told his mother that, and he got off from the table and said, can I go and play? And he went and he was building Lego for 2 hours. Nobody ever said it to him that this was wrong. But the mother went to the core of his being. And this is not so difficult. When a child is aggressive, it's because he's angry. You don't have to study psychology to know that. The trick is to find out about what and with whom is he angry. And usually children are protecting their parents. And they're also protecting their teachers. So, of course he should not bang the cars. Of course Peter should participate in the activities in the class. Of course he should learn. There's no question about that. Of course. The only question is, how can I build a relationship with Peter that makes this happen? And I must tell you that it takes a lot less time than what we are usually doing. So in human relationships, within families, in love relationships between adults, in leadership of any kind, process overrules content. I think everybody knows that. I think everybody who has participated in a meeting that is really, really going bad because there is no good leadership. Everybody who has done that know that whatever this meeting decides, it will never happen. It doesn't matter what you discuss, it is the way you discuss it that ensures success. Of course, this is also true for teaching. How do you teach the history of Slovenia, for instance? How do you teach this and this? But, I don't know, in my experience, most teachers do a good job with that. They're inventive, they're trying, and so on. So this is not the idea. The idea is, or the focus of our attention is, how can we create an atmosphere, how can we create a culture in the classroom that makes it possible for children to learn and for teachers to teach. And in order to do that, we have to face the fact that also families must face that process is most important. The quality of the relationship is what makes everything else happen or not happen. Why has adults been playing this double standard? Well, probably out of ignorance, I think. Probably because we experience, as teachers, parents, everybody, we experience that our children, what they do not do, has a lot of influence on how we feel. So for that reason, we have come, I think, to the conclusion that they can also be responsible. Everything we know shows that they cannot. Children are simply not able to be responsible for the quality of their relationship to adults, be it parents, teachers, grandparents, whatever. This is not an attitude I have. This is not like, this is my opinion. Because I think, it's more fair that the adults are responsible. This is a fact. And you can see that fact every day. You can see children coming from families where the adults are not able to be responsible or don't want to be responsible. And you know that their children are doing bad. They cannot do it simply. That is why adults have to be responsible. And this responsibility is the key to this kind of leadership that we are talking about. Everybody knows that about leaders also. You know that the atmosphere in the school or kindergarten depends 90% of who is the leader, who is the boss. The boss is deciding the culture with his or her behavior. Both the behavior that he or she knows about, and in particular with all the behavior that they don't know about that is going on. It is the same in the government, it is the same in the board of directors, in the business, it is the same in the family. The leader is responsible for the quality of the culture of the process. It is crucial that professional pedagogues begin to realize this and begin to look for ways in which they can administrate this enormous power and this enormous responsibility that this is. It will not work much longer to blame the children, because one day they will simply stop putting up with it and they will walk out of the schools and they will not come back. In Slovenia you still have part of the authoritarian culture left, so it is not so bad here. In the rest of Europe, the dropouts, and we are now talking about children from 13, 14 to 18, the dropouts from school is about 24%. That's 1/4 of pupils, students that are dropping out of school before time, before they get there. And it all has to do with the schools. It doesn't have to do with the children. Okay. Now, the problem we have here is that there is only one door. And it takes a long time to get everybody in and out. But we will take now a half-hour break.